Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon. Apologies, we were a bit late. I'm a bit late. That's my fault. But we are here, so it's good to see you. Claire, whilst we are waiting for some people to join, and if you are joining, please get involved in this conversation. If you want to add and ask Claire any questions, get to the comments and ask to the comments. Claire, whilst you're looking at the screen on StreamYard, you'll see the comment section on the panel on the right-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
That's where all the questions and comments and insights will come in. So, as I said, if you are here listening already, fantastic. It's lovely to see you. I actually don't know who's listening. So the only way we do find out is if you say something in the comments. We've got a few people who signed up. So if you are here, please say hello. Tell us who you are, where you're from. And if you have any questions for Claire throughout this, then please do. I always feel like the questions from the people listening are always better than the questions I have. They're real-time questions, right? They're questions or problems from in an organization. So, but bear with me. I am dyslexic, and I cannot multitask, and I will say that openly. So I will try and read your questions whilst trying to listen, or do one or the other, because I cannot do both. I think that's a fair thing to say out loud. Claire, are you ready?
Yep.
Let's do this. As I said, good afternoon, everybody. Really excited to have Claire here with me to talk about kind of sustained high performance and managing survival mode, burnout, recovery to create this sustainable high performance in an organization, team, or as an individual, right? So I'm really excited to get Claire's insights from all the places she's worked and help people kind of do that. And so, yeah, I'm excited to get going. Liz, hello. Thank you for joining us. Claire, rather than me butcher your introduction, I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself. And if you butcher it, that's down to you. I hope you don't, though. So good luck. Over to you.
Sure. So yeah, I'm Claire, and in terms of my background, so I came from a psychology background. I did a psychology degree, and I've spent most of my career in learning and development, leadership, consultancy. I spent the first half of my career more on the client management, operational side, so sort of project managing big, large-scale clients, and always right from as soon as I started my career, I worked in very high pressure, high demand organizations, and I didn't really know anything different. I kind of worked really long hours, often kind of working late into the night. It was kind of work hard, play hard, and that's something that I did probably for about 10 years, always kind of on the verge of burnout. I just sort of thought that was kind of the level of stress that you naturally lived in. It was about 10 years ago now, maybe 12 years ago, I moved out to Singapore to head up the Asia arm of a business that I was working in. And while I was out there, when I look back and reflect on it, it was probably, there was some incredible experiences being out there, but it was probably like the peak of me feeling burnt out, the peak of me struggling with my mental health. I would just kind of was working and working. I was often working longer hours than people in the UK office, even though they're 8 hours behind, always kind of on the verge of burnout, drinking a lot of alcohol, just trying to cope, just kind of keep it all together. And then when I was in Singapore, I got a call from my sister saying that my mum was in hospital and that I needed to go home suddenly. I got home and she died the next day. So it was a real, a massive kind of seismic life experience, and in a way quite a cliche. I was really, really close to my mum, and I feel like in the years leading up to her death, I hadn't spent much time really being with her. The last kind of conversation I'd had with her, I'd been stressed out about work and I'd been crying about work, and she'd been comforting me about work, and it was like, what am I doing? Why am I focusing on this, and is this actually what I want out of my life? And I ended up seeing a grief counsellor, and she said something to me where she said, isn't success just being happy? And I genuinely had never really considered that. It was like success was getting to the next level, getting the next job title, getting the next pay rise, you know, proving that next thing. And I was like, wow, actually, I don't even know what it is that would make me happy. I've kind of just followed what I've always thought I should be doing. So that was a bit of a wake-up call to say, let's step back from my career, let's have a break. Me and my husband and I had a very small wedding, and then we spent 5 months traveling instead, and just took that step back to be able to come back and say, what is it actually I want to do with my career? And that made me think about work doesn't have to be like that. A lot of people work in that way their whole lives, and it's just sort of that's what's expected of people. And it was like, I want to be able to create something for myself and hopefully for other people, where work can be something that helps you feel filled with purpose, but you're able to have that balance, you're able to know your boundaries, you're able to work with people that make you feel better, help you be at your best, instead of you just feeling like you have to get into that rat race and you have to stay in that rat race, and there's sort of you recover at the weekends and then you come back. It's like, how do you create something a bit different? Which is why I then moved more into the side of delivering, of speaking around what is it that we do in our workplaces that actually is a detriment to our people, not only from a well-being perspective or from a engagement perspective, but actually how much are we having a detriment to people's performance? Because when you are, I was rarely at my best working like that. You know, how could I be at my best if I was working until 3 a.m. and then getting up and working again? I was always working at a lower quality because I was working at such a high pace in such a way that I always felt like I was chasing my tail. So it's like, how do we create environments where people can be at their best? And I've had a great experience in terms of doing that in my second half of my career. I've worked with some incredible brands. I used to work in-house at Burberry on the global wellbeing strategy, do lots of work with different organizations like Channel 4, Avanade, Specsavers, Ministry of Justice, Warner Brothers Discovery. So working with mostly big global kind of corporates in terms of not only how do we equip individuals with the skills to be able to manage their own performance, their own well-being, but also how do we work with leaders and organizations from a ways of working and process perspective, so that we're not just alleviating symptoms, which companies tend to do. Say, okay, well, let's give you an app or some training to alleviate the symptoms. It's saying, how do we identify the root causes so that we are not continually contributing to burnout and to people who are fantastic and have the skills, but are then losing, are kind of dropping off the edge with burnout, or their performance is being really degraded by the fact that they're living in that survival mode constantly.
Yeah. Sounds like quite the journey.
Yeah. It's in some ways there's been themes that have led through. It's always been kind of people related and working with organizations, but it's trying to understand exactly what are the things that I think really, really matter. And for me, I think it doesn't have to be like this. I still work with lots of people where it's like, oh, well, that's just sort of the way it is. And it's like, it doesn't have to be. And not just because it's a case of saying, oh, well, you don't have to work as hard. It's about not having to work in such a way that is unsustainable, is unsensible, is often just a whole load of noise and fake urgency, versus saying, why don't we be a bit more clear about what it is we want to prioritize, working in a kind of leaner, clearer way that doesn't put people in survival mode. And the impact of people being in survival mode actually makes work harder. And we can talk a bit more about what that looks like. So yeah, it's I find it really interesting. I love having the variety. I love being able to work with different organizations and see that in many ways we're all human beings, so the themes apply across all organizations, but they can be in very different contexts, right?
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. There are very common themes that do arise through coaching
Yeah.
or the work I do. That, yeah, but with different ways of managing that for individuals and the teams they're in.
Yeah.
Just listening to that piece, there's a couple of bits which I kind of hear here. Is one which really resonates with my time as a personal trainer, with people start doing something when something's happened. And I think it was the same for me as within my mental health journey. I lost a friend 8 years ago, and then I began to dive into the mental health challenge.
Mhm.
I'm trying to understand mental health. It's something happens for us to make that change, and it sounds like that happened with your mum, but then you had the big moment of reflection trying to understand it. And it's the same for personal training. Normally someone has a health risk or a health issue, and they go, I need to lose weight, or I need to get fit and healthy, or I had this injury, I need to go and do this. And I always go back to, why do we wait for that to happen before we do?
Yeah. It reminds me, there's like a meme that I often see that's a bit cheesy, but it does really resonate with me, is often when it says, like, as parents, you always say you would die for your kids, but would you live for them? Like, would you do more exercise? Would you eat healthier? Would you go to therapy? Would you do all the things that means that you can live a full life? Because dying for your kids is kind of easy in a way, but it's like, will you do the hard stuff that means you can live a longer life, you can live a happier life, you can live a more present life? Because it's not about those dramatic moments. It's about saying day to day, is this the life I want to lead? And what can I do to make sure I'm taking the steps towards a life that's going to be more fulfilling for me? Because at the end of the day, it's only you that kind of looks back and reflects and says, is that what I wanted, or who did I do that for? Or was it just because I thought I should?
And that leads really nicely onto the second thing I hear is, like, you didn't take the time to reflect previously. Like, you were just in the moment working, and that's something I see as a coach all of the time. And when I ask the question, what's important to you? What does success look like for you in 5 years' time? Where are you going? What are you trying to achieve? And there's so many people who don't do that reflection and analyzation of what's gone, like successes, and what the clues are for that, and maybe the learnings that they maybe aren't picking up on, but also where they want to go in regards to, like, their vision, their motivators, their like important things in life, maybe their values. And so many people just don't do that. And it sounds like when you did that, then things began to change. You began to manage yourself better. You began to look at those clues or behaviors which
and I think that actually really helps. I think that we often don't reflect on what matters to us, and then it's really hard to know what to do with ourselves. Like, if we don't know what it is that we really want out of life, or what we want from this year, or what our main goal is, then you end up trying to do everything. And there's a book by Philip Berkman called 4,000 Weeks. I don't know if you've read it, but 4,000 weeks is the average. That's the average amount of time we're alive, right? It's 4,000 weeks. And he says that in our lives, if we only did things that we wanted to do, we still would not have time to do them all. So we have got to stop doing so many things that we don't actually want to do, because we haven't got time to do all the things we want to do, let alone doing 100 things we don't want to do. And I get, in reality, we do have to do certain things we don't want to do, like pay our stupid tax bill. It's that time of year. But there are so many things that we just do that we don't really want to be doing, and we go, is this really what I need to be doing? Or why am I doing this? Or am I doing this because that person expects it of me? But actually, what do I owe that person? It's like, actually, so I always myself, and I've only been in this a couple of years, but it really helps me, because being neurodivergent, I am really prone to burnout and trying to do everything. So it's going, what it is I want to achieve from this year, and then every kind of project or task I'm doing, I think, is this taking me towards that goal, or is it taking me away from that goal? And if it's not taking me towards that goal, then this is something I need to deprioritize, or I need to drop, or I need to ask someone else to do, because I cannot do it all. And right now, that might be a nice thing to do, but right now, this is my goal for the next 3 months, and I need to focus on that versus getting pulled off in other directions. So I think it's something that we don't tend to do enough, is go, what is it that I want? And yes, I know in a reality where you need to earn money and you need to pay your bills, but you are still able to say, but what is it that I care about, and what is it that matters to me, and what percentage of the things am I doing is taking me towards that? What percentage of the things that I am stressing about in my head are taking me towards that goal, or basically distracting me? And getting a bit clearer on that, because when you're working towards things that matter to you, you're much less likely to get burnt out, because you're doing things that mean something to you.
Yeah. I completely agree. Yeah. It's enjoyable work, right? So you'll do that and not feel the pressure of it. No, I want to get back into understanding the survival mode. You've obviously spent a lot of time within organizations, both from sounds like a burnout or high pressure environments. In your time in L&D, right? You've obviously switched a little bit. I think obviously they're connected, but towards the workplace culture and the well-being of organizations. And I don't know whether you, because I see this, what I do is like, the work I do is the outcome is well-being. I don't know whether you see that as how you work, or do you see, well, I'm working on well-being and the outcome is better ways of working. I don't know how you see that.
Yeah.
I'll let you answer that question.
So I think that well-being is usually, I think well-being is so weaved into everything else. So it's usually about like, what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve? And if we're honest or realistic about what organizations are trying to achieve, it is more money, right? It is profit share, it is performance, it is hitting certain targets or deadlines. So that is the ultimate goal. And it's like, how can the work that we are doing with teams help to achieve that? And a lot of the time that is about creating the environment where teams can be at their best. If you trust that you have hired, I'm not part of the talent acquisition team, so let's trust that process, you have got a group of people who are incredibly talented and they are, able to deliver and hit these objectives and these targets. What you can do is then create an environment where they're able to do that as frictionlessly as possible. And that is by an efficiency perspective. So how are you making sure that there isn't just meeting after meeting after meeting, fake urgency culture, 100 different priorities that keep changing constantly? So it's like, actually, what is it we're trying to achieve and how do we get there? Who knows? We're just kind of getting barraged with all this information. And then what are you doing from a culture perspective? Because if we're thinking about survival mode versus performance mode, our nervous systems are set to we're set to spot threats, right? Our amygdala in our brain, it's ready to spot threats, and it is there to keep us alive. Our brains don't care about whether we're happy or whether we can perform or problem solve, like on a real base level. Our amygdala, all it cares about is keeping us alive. So it spots a threat, it puts our nervous system into fight or flight, it sends adrenaline, cortisol running through our bodies, our heart rate's up, our blood pressure's up. Often we kind of get a dry mouth. We're kind of we're really ready for that physical fight or flight. And that is fantastic in acute moments of stress. So I was thinking about this the other day when my daughter was very little. She was born just before lockdown. So we were in lockdown and she was like sitting up but not crawling, and she toppled over into the hot tub in our garden. And I have never moved so fast and like whipped her out. And my husband was like, I didn't even, like, it was like a blur. You move so quickly. And that is survival mode. That is threat response working the way it should, right? I needed to do nothing. I wouldn't have been able to tell you what time of day it was, where I was, I wouldn't have been able to solve a problem or be polite to anyone, but I could save my daughter in that moment. That works in that acute moment. But if my amygdala is constantly being triggered by the deadline changing, or someone yelling at me, or me getting a million emails that I can't keep on top of, that's putting me into survival mode where I'm just staying there. And that's not what it's designed for. It's designed to respond to like acute moments of stress in time. And when I'm staying in survival mode constantly, my body and my brain is saying, what I need to do is I need to prioritize surviving. So therefore, things like being creative, collaborating with my team members, really weighing up the pros and cons before I make a decision, being polite to people, all of that stuff is kind of deprioritized right now because I'm in survival mode. So I am less likely to think strategically. I'm less likely to be bringing other people in my team. I'm much more likely to snap at people. I'm less likely to trust the people around me because my body is saying, you are not safe. Trust no one, everyone for themselves. And so you're more likely to isolate from other people. So survival mode is an important part of our nervous system, but when we are in survival mode, it kind of works against us being better. We don't perform well because we are focused on survival. We're not focused on performing. And so and I think, unfortunately, a lot of organizations constantly are putting people in survival mode, because if you think about some of the things that put you in survival mode or feel like a threat, that's things like ambiguity, so that's changing demands, changing deadlines, overload when you feel like you can't cope with everything that's coming at you, perhaps toxic culture, perhaps you don't know what your job looks like, what's expected of you, you don't feel safe in the environment because you feel like if you make a mistake it's going to get held against you, people might talk about you behind your back, like all of that stuff. Our brain sees that as a threat to our survival, so we go into survival mode. And so as organizations, what is it that we can do to reflect on what is the culture that we're creating, and how does that, what side of the coin when it comes to our nervous system, from like fight or flight or rest and digest, or we're feeling safe, we're feeling able to connect, we're feeling able to make better decisions, we're being able to come up with better ideas, what side of the coin are we putting our people in? Because often you think, oh well, a little bit of pressure can help. Yes, a little bit of pressure can help, but that's not the same as putting people in chronic survival mode constantly, because that is just starts to degrade your ability to think clearly, and it degrades your overall well-being as well, because that starts to have an impact on how you feel, how you think, and kind of the long-term impacts of that.
There's so many questions I have for you, but I'm going to go with this one to start with.
Okay.
When I'm listening to what you're saying around survival mode, the thing which I hear is, and I really liked your example of picking up your daughter in an individual moment, in short bursts, that could be really useful. So survival mode,
absolutely, yeah.
So survival mode, but not just. But then I put that into the workplace and go, okay, we're in an individual moment where I don't need other people. Then that could be really useful.
Yeah, or if it's oh my God, guys, the client needs this tonight, all hands on deck, a bit of adrenaline, that's going to help. But it's almost like, what's a genuine trigger versus what are created triggers? Because a genuine trigger of being like, oh my goodness, we need to turn this around right now, and we really need to get all together and we need to do this, versus actually my leader is always is never clear about what's going on. I never know what mood they're going to turn up in. I know that if I say something that comes across a bit silly, they're going to hold it against me. Like, those are all triggers that put you in survival mode that don't help. They just put you in a system where then you've got to focus on on dealing with your survival mode. And I know someone who suffers with anxiety, when I have a real surge of being in survival mode and a real surge of adrenaline, I mean, that's all I can think about. It's dominating everything else. It's not making me go, oh, great, well, now I'm in a really good position to do my best work. What it's actually doing is me going, oh my God, now I can't breathe and I feel like I'm, suffocating. And that's an extreme version. But when you're putting people constantly in survival mode for unnecessarily, that the toll on that, the energy that takes, is huge, versus there being short periods of time where a little bit of stress is going to help you focus, it's going to help you motivate. You don't want to be stuck in apathy where you don't care or you've got no pressure, because then you don't learn. You want to move outside of your comfort zone and be able to have that certain level of pressure. But when it tips to being too much, then you're stuck in survival mode and you're fairly useless. And then you have to work double the amount of hours. If I look back to my time in Singapore, where I said I was working, so many more hours, I was probably working so many more hours because I needed to get the work done, because I was so much less capable of doing my work and I couldn't switch off either. When you get to a point where you're like, if the idea of not working is more stressful than taking a break because I'm so stuck in survival mode that it's easier to be dealing with the threat than trying to step away from it and put any boundaries in place.
And there's a problem there.
Yeah.
I'm hearing psychological safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Just bringing through this.
Yeah.
Do you see there being a difference between psychological safety and survival mode?
So I was doing a talk in Zurich end of last year, and someone said to me, I was actually talking about neuro inclusion, and what you can do to create more inclusive environments for people, different brains. And they were like, if you could only do one thing, what would you do? And I said, I think that fundamental piece is always psychological safety, because it's easy to say, oh, well, we want to be inclusive in these ways and these ways and these ways. But actually being inclusive is about being inclusive. You don't have to have a list of all the people you want to include. It's being inclusive means including everybody. And that's by creating psychological safety. And you might not know what it is your people need. You might not know what it is what you need to do to create the best environment for them to do their best work. But by creating a psychological safe environment, you make it safe for them to be able to tell you. So it's about saying, actually, how do I create this environment where people feel safe to say, I think we could do this differently, or this doesn't work for me, or I need extra support, or I've made a mistake, can you help me? And it's almost it's simplifying it. It's not easy at all, because it's really about consistency, but it's taking it back to saying, I don't need a million tick boxes for reasonable adjustments to all these different people. I need to say, what am I doing right as a foundational level, so that people then feel safe to be able to ask, and then we can look at things like reasonable adjustments. And that is always a place to start from a leadership perspective, from a process perspective, is how are you making sure that everything feels safe? Because if you feel safe, then you're less likely to be in survival mode, right? That's literally, if you're in survival mode, it's because you don't feel safe and something is triggering you and making you feel unsafe. So what is it that you're doing as a leader or as a culture to help people feel safe? And that can be from an individual leader behavior perspective, but it also can be from a organizational, how do you communicate? Like, what is your internal comm strategy? What is your vision? How are you updating people? All of this stuff. It's like, how do you link this to something that feels safe versus something that triggers people's survival mechanism?
I really like the link and how you've got round to that link of psychological safety, creating an environment where people feel safe, and then the comparison between the survival mode and safety. And how, if you don't, it takes me back to moments where I've worked with hockey coaches. I've been part of a team, but in a team where I've been self-employed, right? But where but I go back to my hockey time, where if I've not been able to feel psychologically safe, my performance drops, but also I don't feel comfortable to speak out. And so you get the input from me. And then my stress goes up and anxiety goes up and enjoyment probably as well goes down. And so, huge. So I guess, look, I'm completely off script here. But I think I'm trying to get my head around, because I understand how that connects to survival mode. The one thing I don't understand here is the connection with that example to burnout.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I think I see burnout as sustained levels of pressure.
Yeah.
And sustained levels of workload.
Yeah.
How that? Yeah. Can you let know what that looks like?
Yeah. So I like to use the theory, polyvagal theory, which basically is you have kind of 3 different zones. So you've got your green zone, which is like the social connection zone, which would be rest and digest. Your nervous system is calm. You're able to connect, collaborate. You're kind of able to perform. And then when your amygdala spots a threat, it will put you up into the red zone, fight or flight, freeze or fawn. Your adrenaline's running. Your heart rate's up, you are responding to that threat. Unfortunately, especially in the world we live in, where things are so overly connected, you can pick up your phone and you can read about war, trauma, you can get an email telling you off about something, you can miss a deadline, you can have someone shout at you on the train. We are at risk a lot of the time to being stuck in survival mode. So when you spend too much time in survival mode, this adrenaline, this cortisol that's in your body, it's supposed to be acute. It's supposed to be in your body for short periods of time. So when it's in your body for a long period of time, that starts to have chronic impacts. And that has things like headaches, stomach issues, skin problems, things like eczema, psoriasis. They come from like lots of cortisol, and bone issues, muscle problems. There's so many issues that come from having this kind of high level and being stuck in fight or flight. And if you're there for too long, then you risk moving up into the blue zone. And the blue zone is where your body says it's actually safer for me to shut down than it is for me to carry on in fight or flight for such a long period of time. And that is when you experience burnout, because your body is saying, I'm shutting down, and I'm going to start to feel more cynicism. I'm going to start to feel more less connected, and my body is my nervous system is going to protect me, is going to start to shut down, and that's where you're experiencing burnout. So healthy mental health would be to be doing this. So you go up into the red zone. We can't avoid that. We as human beings, we're meant to go up into the red zone. We're meant to respond, but then you would be able to recognize that. You're able to put the tools in place to bring yourself back down, and perhaps you've not got so many triggers that it's keeping you there, and you'd be doing this, right? But a lot of the time we do this and we stay up here, and then the risk is that we end up here and then it can take years and years to get our nervous systems back into a place where we're able to get back into the green zone. So being able to recognize that we're in survival mode, to be able to put the tools in place to bring ourselves back down, but also as companies to not be constantly triggering people and putting them into survival mode, we're much less likely to then have people experiencing burnout.
Yeah. And I think connected to that is the concept of understanding the amount of pressure.
Yeah.
Because I had 2 questions. First, I had 1 question, but the amount of pressure makes a difference, right? Because because I look at obviously self-development, we both do, and we want to, in self-development. I know I definitely do. You go out of your comfort zone to develop.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's going to go into the red mode.
Yeah,
and that's a good thing, because that is out of our comfort zone. That's pushing us. That's going to be there's anxiety and pressure there. But obviously, then that's just one example. That's one thing I wanted just to mention, bring to connection to the importance of that. But then going into it for too long, and this is an example I think we both have lived by and probably shared, that 100-meter sprinter. And ask that 100-meter sprinter to run at that pace for 1,000 meters or 2,000 meters. So what point is it that you can hold that momentum and that pace before you break down.
Yeah.
Do you need to have a different tactic? So your 200 meters they run 100 meters very differently to they run their 200 meters, and they run the 200 meter very differently to they run the 400 meters. So you have to understand maybe the project or the system, the process you're working on to get the right outcome and manage the survival mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often use the example of like weightlifting when you're thinking about kind of building your resilience or kind of building your ability to cope with pressure, is that you might lift a certain weight and then you take a break, right? And you have to have an intentional rest and then you to lift the weight again. And you want a weight that is hard, but you don't want to be lifting something that's going to pull your muscle, is going to strain your muscles. You want to build up to that. And it's like you put yourself under a certain amount of pressure and you go slightly out of your comfort zone, and then you take a step back and you rest, and then you do it again and you do it again until you get to a point where it's like, actually, this weight isn't as hard as it used to be anymore. I can go up a weight. And that's the same when it comes to how much you can cope with in terms of your nervous system. But if you went straight to lifting a really heavy weight, you would cause yourself a ton of damage, and it wouldn't help. So that is kind of when you think about the level of pressure or the amount that you can cope with it, and that will vary from person to person, and it will vary over time as well. There are days where you think, oh, I can take on the world and I can do anything, and there are other days where you can't do that. And being able to recognize that people's capability does vary from day to day, because there are so many factors that are involved there. And what are you doing as a team or as a leader to make sure that the pressure that's there is necessary pressure versus unnecessary pressure? And often there's so much unnecessary pressure, like too many meetings or too much ambiguity or too much conflict or inconsistency or people not understanding the expectations of them. And that's all stuff that is a waste of time. It's noise, and it causes stress that takes away from stress that could be used to actually push people and help them with their development, or to do certain projects that really deliver on pushing people towards that end business objective, versus it just being stress for the sake of stress.
And I think it goes back to that enjoyment piece, right? Working to our strengths, because if we're doing more of that, those moments of things which are high pressure or perceived high pressure, putting us into those zones, then we are less likely to feel that.
Yeah.
Right. So, and so I try to think about, how do you stop that from happening? Because work could be full of high pressure moments, but actually, as you said, if you focus your work to the things you enjoy, and as a team you kind of separate the work to people's strengths and enjoyments, and you're going to get a team which is collaborating well, being able to manage that amount of pressure. Maybe you can give them more than you would do as well.
And I think that comes back to the inclusion piece, because often leaders, and it kind of is a natural, bias, but you often have that affinity bias where you recognize people who have similar strengths to you, and you kind of think of them as better than people who have different strengths for you, and then you often end up with a group of people who've all got the same strengths, which means you've all got the same weaknesses. But it's actually thinking the best team we can have is a group of people who have different strengths and different gaps, because then we can all lean into our strengths and we've got it covered, right? Rather than there being this one gaping hole that none of us can do and someone then has to really kind of push themselves to do. So how do you create an environment where you're going, as a team, I want people who have all different types of brains. I want people who are reflectors. I want introverts. I want extroverts. I want people who love to get in the detail. I want people who are really good at the big picture thinking. So you've got all of these different types of thinking, and you are motivating and empowering people to lean into those strengths. And I've had that experience with leaders where they've said, like fantastic leaders where they've gone, you're so good at this and this is not my strength, so this is why I really appreciate getting you involved in this. What do you think? Rather than all being a bunch of kind of mini me's where it's like you're just sort of carbon copies of this one leader. It's going, actually, we need different types of thought, we need different types of skills, and how do we embrace that difference? How do we leverage that difference so that we are balancing the workload, but also that's another psychological safety piece, because we're making everyone feel that they are valued, and that they are needed, and we aren't missing a trick, because we often, I think, the way in which companies set up the way that they're working means that there are certain people who think in a different way that just you never really hear from them, you never really give them an opportunity to shine, which means that all of that incredible skill, that incredible talent is kind of missed, because the processes and the ways that the team or the company set up don't allow for them to contribute as much as they could. So it's not even a case of it's nice for everyone to be involved, it's a competitive advantage for everyone to be involved.
More ideas on the table, more options to choose from, the better outcome.
Exactly.
Look, there's been a couple of people in the comments. I don't know if you've seen this. I've not been able to multitask. But first, my question: Do you know Ryan Briggs?
I do, yes.
He's a very good friend of mine. I didn't know that. He's in the chat, but I'm going to show you Sam's kind of comment. Even knowing what I want has been a problem for me. Do I even have the wants of my own? I have felt like I'm only doing what I should and on autopilot rather than trying to do everything. I have often done nothing or only what I have assumed others wanted. A couple of life crises later, my therapy is helping me to get in touch with my wants so I can have a life that can help me feel authentic and chosen. Thanks, Sam, for jumping in. Is there anything there which you want to pull out?
I think it's really hard sometimes to know what it is you want, and I think we have to really untangle what we've been told we want. And for me, what I tend to do is I will look at, like, I'll look at my calendar or I'll look at the things that are coming up, and I will just allow like my gut to respond to it, and I'll be like, and it's almost as simple as that. What makes me go and what makes me go and just note that and observe that to begin with, and then once you get a bit more of a sense of what that pattern is, it's like, okay, so why is that? Actually, it seems that I enjoy that stuff because that helps me be more creative, or that helps me be more connected to people. Like, I know, and I was always a really creative child. I did lots and lots of art. And then I stopped really being creative because it wasn't really very helpful in my career or whatever, you know. And then when I started working for myself, I realized that is the thing I enjoy the most in the world. And it doesn't have to be painting a picture. It can be coming up with ideas, or it can be designing something, or developing new content, or writing an article. But creativity like makes my heart sing. And it's probably only in the past 5 years that I've brought creativity back into my career, and that's kind of sad in a way, but great that I've got to a point where I'm doing that. But I think that I discovered that from allowing myself to reflect on what makes me go and what makes me go and just letting that kind of build up, and it takes a bit of time, but it's like spotting those themes, but it does take a lot of untangling. Like, whose voice is this? Is this my school teacher's voice? Is this my parents' voice? Is it, society telling me I should do this versus what actually is I want? But usually your gut in the first second tells you if you give it a bit of space to speak.
And I also think there's a bit of practice involved. Like, I started really reflecting 4 to 5 years ago. I probably lived in the mess space probably beforehand, just to live day to day. And when I look back at those moments where I questioned what I wanted, what my vision was very different to the process I have now. I'm better at reflection, being able to dive deeper, and better at setting better goals. The visions get clearer. I think it comes down to practice. Like we talk about practice from a sports angle consistently. We spoke, and then you translate that into the workplace. The more you practice, the better you get, because the lessons you learn from it if you're reflecting on it. So I think the more you do of the reflection and the giving it a go at what you want, and maybe more questions and more people you speak to, the better you get to finding the wants, because you are the process of getting better.
Yeah.
Ryan's also had a question here, hence probably more of an input as well, hence why so many health issues arise from prolonged stress.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that personally. You know, I've experienced anxiety, and a lot of that is from kind of having undiagnosed ADHD. But I move into fight or flight very often, and your body is not. It's supposed to be an acute moment in time, right? And it's supposed to be where you run away from that saber-toothed tiger, and you get to safety in a cave. That's like kind of evolutionarily what it's designed to do. And when that gets stuck in your system, it causes so much impact, and that can be from. I mean, it can cause anything, you know, not under long, prolonged periods of time. For me, I get things like tinnitus, I get migraines, I get, you know, stomach issues, I get psoriasis. So a lot of that stuff is from that prolonged. And we often then try to treat those things rather than actually what has caused this in the first place. You know, okay, well, it's great, we've got a cream for the psoriasis, or we're taking painkillers for the headaches, but actually what is it that is causing this in the long term? And I think that there's there's many prongs, but for me it's like a two-pronged approach, which is, one is, what can I do to make sure that I am constantly soothing my nervous system? And I think of my nervous system as like this sort of, it's a very kind of individual part of me where I'm like, I need to be soothing my nervous system, and I need to do certain things instead of trying to logic my way out of saying, okay, you know, you're stressed and you shouldn't worry about this, don't bother. Like, my nervous system isn't listening to that. It needs to be soothed. Like, physically, there are certain things I need to do to soothe my nervous system, to put myself back into rest and digest. But then I also need to think about what are the things that trigger me, and do I either need to put boundaries in place to stop them from triggering me, or do I need to do further work, whether that's from a therapy perspective or a conversation perspective, to stop them triggering me so much. Because we will always have triggers in our lives, but it's thinking about what triggers can I soften, shut out with boundaries, or like distance myself from them with boundaries, or understand a bit more so they don't impact me so much, so that I sort of save my nervous system for the triggers that are always going to be necessary, because there will always be things that are necessary to respond in that way. But I think that we spend 90% of our time responding to triggers that we needn't be responding in that way, and it's how do we manage that? Because we are so much better when we are able to come back into rest and digest as quickly and as safely as possible, because that means our body is able to longer term just be, well, we're much healthier if we don't spend too much time in that fight or flight.
Yeah, completely agree. Look, I'm going to bring us back, because we are taking a big detour back to the track anyway. I'm trying to figure out how it connects to the next bit, but
just throw it out there.
Just throw it out there. From the Formula One perspective, they have intense 2-week cycles followed by intentional rest and regrouping. You've done some work with Williams here, right? Can you let us know how we can translate that into a corporate team, applying the same rhythm when they feel pressure and which never stops?
Yeah,
and all this knowledge we were speaking about rest and digest and kind of prolonged stress and pressure. How do we create better rhythms to recovery?
Yeah, and I think that a big issue in corporate land is the culture that everything is urgent, that everything needs to be done, that we have to do all of these priorities. Like, semantically, priority is not supposed to be it's not supposed to be, you're not only supposed to have one, it's supposed to be singular. It's supposed to be, you're supposed to have one priority, you're not supposed to have multiple priorities. But we're always like, oh, what are all these priorities? And then we've got to do all of this, but we've also got to have these meetings, we've got to do this, and we've got to do this deadline. So there's a culture that goes against the kind of the whole kind of concept of let's focus and then rest, and let's focus and then rest. But actually that means that everyone is then going at 110%, but then your effort continues to increase, but your outputs are going down and down and down. So it's how do we as organizations deprioritize? I always think, instead of going what are our priorities, it's saying what are our depriorities, what things do not matter right now, what things can happen next quarter, what things can just never happen. Let's just give ourselves the gift of saying we're not going to do this. It was a good idea last month, but it's not a good idea this month. We're not going to do this. So almost readdressing, revisiting, and saying what are the things that we're going to strip out? What are we not going to do? And then really getting down to the crux of what actually matters. And that can feed back into what is our team objectives? What's our business objectives? Say you work for an organization and the objective is that you're trying to launch a new product and your team is the marketing team. So therefore your key priority is making sure that all the marketing is ready for that new product. Okay, well, there's something else we're supposed to be doing, but it doesn't actually link to that right now. Right. We're getting rid of it right now. We're stressed. We've got a lot on. This is all we're going to do. In 6 months, we'll revisit it. But right now, let's forget about it. Let's not worry about it. And so so you get it to a point where you're really focusing on the things that actually matter. And then how do you put that into cycles? How do you say, well, we're going to be really focused for the next 2 weeks, but then we're going to have a break? Do we perhaps circle that round? I was working with a client where they said that one of the roles in their team is a really, really hardcore role. So they swapped round. They all did it for 2 months and then they swapped it round. So no one had to deal with it entirely. So there are things like that where you could say, actually, this half of the team is going to be really, really focused for 2 weeks and then they're going to have a week break while this team steps up. Or these are the certain things we need to approach, but then we need to make sure that we're taking breaks. And as a leader, I think often it's bad habits that you go, oh, but now we're a bit quieter, so we could probably pull that thing back in from 6 months that we said we look at in 6 months. No, you have to say right now, the only way for us to perform at our best is for us to take a step back, is for us to perhaps catch up on some of the lighter admin. It's for us to take a day off. It's for us to have that break and remember that that is actually part of the performance recipe. And if you don't do that, it's just a false economy because people then take sick. They're not performing as well as they can. So what do you strip out? What are the priorities? What are not the priorities? What are you doing to make sure that you're planning that out? And are you perhaps spreading the stress around the team and making sure that you are readjusting that and being dynamic with that? And then also, what are you doing from a culture perspective to make sure that any stress or pressure on your team is necessary stress and pressure, not unnecessary stress and pressure? Because in the corporate world, so much of it is unnecessary stress and pressure. It is noise. It is just nonsense versus actually, what did we do today? What did I do today that led me towards my team's goals? I sat in 9 meetings and heard everyone argue about stuff. And then I tried to catch up on all my emails. Nothing I did today led me towards my team's goals. So
I couldn't imagine it. Could you? Yeah. I couldn't imagine. Yeah. I mean, I'm very lucky. I've not come from the corporate world and experienced that, but listening to some people's days just sound like
and that's what a waste. What a waste. Do you think that's a day where they could have really helped move the dial on things that matter
or recovered?
All recovered. You could have spent the day in bed, or you could have done stuff that actually helped achieve these goals. And is it either of those? And I think as leaders, it's really critically assessing how your team is working, and then how is your team, what's your culture, and how are you leading that as a leader? And then how is your team working, and what is necessary pressure, what is not necessary pressure, and what are you doing to help people do this? Because otherwise it's a ticking time bomb, because people will leave, people will go off sick, or they'll stay, but they won't give you what they used to give you because they physically can't.
And they're not interested to either, because you make
no, why? Yeah, and what for? You say, oh well, we're going to have a rest soon. Are we? You said that. We never did. Like, we never even celebrated that we achieved this project. We just moved on to the next one. So it's like, how do we make sure that we are actually working in those cycles in a way that actually is real, and you're not being a hypocrite about it?
And we wonder why there's only 13% engagement rates.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The one thing which I'm going to add here is something which I as a coach, we don't advise, but we share a lot of knowledge. And the piece of knowledge which I find really relevant to this is the Eisenhower matrix. Understanding urgency, understanding importance. Once you've understood that, helps you do that priority thing.
Yeah.
And then go, well, everything else isn't a priority. This is the most important and urgent thing which is on my plate right now. Everything else has to be scheduled or delegated.
Yeah.
Once I know that, I'm in a much better place because I can manage all the plates. And I find when I give that information around the Eisenhower matrix, it allows people to do that, which gives people control, but it also allows people to understand controllables and order the stress.
And it helps them know what's expected of them. And that leads to psychological safety, when it's like, when you know what you're meant to do and what you're not expected to do. Because I think often when you think, oh, no one's mentioned this, but I think I should do that because if I don't, I'm going to get in trouble. That's unnecessary stress, versus being like, this is what I need you to do. And if there's time, this would be great. But if there's no time, ditch it. Like, that's clear. It helps you as a team know where you stand, what's expected of you, what's not expected of you. And I think that we often spend too much time just kind of trying to do a bit of everything, rather than going, what is it that is really needed of us as a team, and then how does that trickle down into what is really needed of us as individuals.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Ryan's added a couple of bits here. And then we'll have a final question for you. I suppose the hard bit is really understanding how much is too much for ourselves and also for each team member. It brings up inclusivity for the whole team, but balance with personal approach, etc., without people seeing it as one rule for one, etc.
Yeah.
And then just add in love it, Claire. For me, soothing music, cooking, playing with the kids in sauna. And then in brackets here, who's written non-necessary in that order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the comment on the kind of one rule for one, I think that often we worry that, oh, well, then we're giving someone special treatment versus someone else. But I think if you're creating psychological safety and you're creating that inclusivity, some people need more at certain times and some people need more at other times. And it is about having that flexibility to make sure. And it doesn't have to be these big changes where it's like this person's working at home all the time and this person isn't. It's saying, actually, what is it that you all need from the team to be at your best, and how can we make sure we're giving that to each of us? And usually it's simple things like, I really need clarity when you communicate with me, or I need to know that I can have a couple of hours where I'm just undisturbed, where I can get my emails done, and being able to do some of that stuff and understand what it is each other needs. Then everyone's got their own kind of little micro environment where they can work at their best, and that just takes communication, and everyone has the opportunity to say and request, so then it doesn't feel like it's unfair. It's something that is for everybody.
Yeah, well, look, I could add more here, but I'm not going to. I'm going to finish with my last question. If someone listening to this is a leader within an organization and realizes their team might be in that survival mode, what's the one thing they could do differently tomorrow?
I think do take a look at what your team is doing, and think about what's unnecessary. Either it's like, I mean, one thing I'd say is take a look at people's meetings, because if you can get rid of so many meetings that are unnecessary, why are you having those meetings? Do people need to be there? Could this be an email? Could it be a Loom video? Could it be an asynchronous live document? You might give someone back 5 hours of their week Like that's a massive win when it comes to getting someone out of survival mode, is by thinking about people's meetings. And then it's going, what are we trying to achieve as a team? How does that feed into the business objectives? And what can we deprioritize? Because just giving people space to breathe is going to help people like get themselves back down into a place where they feel able to kind of rest and digest and be more in performance mode. And then you've got space to think about, okay, well then what are we doing culturally? You know, what are we doing from that psychological safety perspective? But just take a moment to go, what are we doing that we don't need to be doing, and how can we ditch it right now?
Yeah, I love that piece of advice. Claire, thank you. What can people do to find out more about you, or where can people find you?
Yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn, or you can go to my website, which is www.clarekenny.com. I do lots and lots of free content, podcasts, articles, guides. So you can go to the free resources and have a look there, and to read more stuff if you're interested.
Yeah. And it's Claire without an I, which I have failed.
That's right. Yeah. Claire. Yeah. Claire with no I. Clare Kenny. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. There is an extra comment here, which I think is Liz. Thank you for joining, Liz.
Thanks, Liz.
Appreciate it. Claire, stay where you are. Keep an eye out for the next one with Catherine Ritchie, looking at wellbeing within the law firms. So
nice.
Really so you keep an eye out for that. Everybody else, have a great week, and I will see you all next week. Claire, stay where you are.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.